Welcome back to our discussion on the calendar issues and the Qumran and the Zadokite or Tzedokim, the priests of the house or Beit Tzadok at Qumran. Eddie, let's talk now about Judaism as it is known to follow the Babylonian calendar, the system that they brought back with them from the exile in Babylon.
So let's look at a chart here of the Babylonian calendar. And so on the first column, you have the Babylonian month name as it would be in the Babylonian language. And then in the second column, we have the Babylonian gods that are associated with each Babylonian month. And then over on the right of the chart, we have the way that we would say the name today in Hebrew rendered into English, and then what it corresponds to on our Greco-Roman Gregorian calendar. And so once you look at this chart, it should be 100% obvious, without any dispute, without any doubt, that Orthodox Judaism today, in celebrating the festivals, is following a Babylonian calendar. And once you realize that is so, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, are we really saying that following Torah and following Torah in Yeshua, that following Torah is following a Babylonian calendar? The God of Israel gave the nation of Israel a Babylonian calendar to follow? Are we really saying that with a straight face, but really without contemplating and thinking about it? That is in essence what we are saying, and people have said that. Even leaders have said that the God of Israel gave the nation of Israel a Babylonian calendar with Babylonian month names that are associated with Babylonian gods, and that is how he wants his people to keep the festivals. That in and by itself...
That doesn't even sound right.
It's ridiculous. And so I was aware over the years that this is the way that things were being done in Judaism, but I didn't have any alternative to do.
Yeah, neither did I.
But once I learned and studied the Qumran and the history, like we've gone over, and that the Qumran community was led by Zadok priests, and they preserved and kept a priestly calendar, and then learning that there actually was a calendar dispute between what they were doing and this calendar, then to me it became real simple. It became real easy that the Torah calendar that the God of Israel would have given his people would be a unique calendar to Israel, and that is this 364-day calendar, which, when we continue on in this discussion, in this teaching, we're going to see that calendar is in the Torah, so that besides people seeing that Judaism is following a Babylonian calendar, they can alternatively see, okay, I can clearly see this priestly calendar in the Torah, and that really should, to anybody that's honest, should seal the deal right there.
It should, yeah. Yeah, I would think so, yeah. So we have here the names. This is just a sampling of the names of some of these Babylonian names for the months. We have Nisan, Ayar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul. I think of Elul as in Judaism, that's the month of repentance and restoration to get ready for the fall festivals. You have Av, the month of Av, like the 9th of Av, when the temple fell. And, they use these names all the time, right? I mean, I see it all the time. And they're all linked to this, to these pagan names.
So, there's a congregational leaders and leaders, even in our movement, when presented that there is a priestly calendar versus a Babylonian calendar, for whatever reason, they end up thinking, wait a second, we cannot leave the Babylonian calendar. We cannot leave the Babylonian calendar. Well, one of the Babylonian months' names is Tammuz.
Tammuz.
When they are in effect saying, wait, we can't leave the Babylonian calendar because, for whatever reason, they are effectively weeping for leaving the Babylonian calendar. They're effectively weeping for Tammuz.
Well, it says this in Ezekiel 8:14-15. So he brought me to the door of the north gate of the Lord's house, or Jehovah's house, and to my dismay, women were sitting there weeping for Tammuz. And he said to me, have you seen this, O son of man? Turn again, and you will see greater abominations than these.
Okay, so where did the weeping for Tammuz take place? Where?
Jerusalem.
In the temple. They were the door of the north gate of the Lord's house, of the temple. So the weeping was in the temple, where ultimately the authority in the temple to determine when you're to keep the biblical festivals, that decision and that authority from that decision comes out and from the temple. And so if you tell that system that they shouldn't be keeping a Babylonian calendar, they said, yeah, we should be keeping the Babylonian calendar. And so they are, in fact, by not wanting to depart from it, are lamenting if they do. And in lamenting, they are, in effect, weeping for Tammuz. And this took place in the temple. And so effectively, the same thing, the same parallel would be happening today. And then in Ezekiel chapter 9, verse 4, the Lord said, go through Jerusalem and put a mark. That's the Hebrew letter Tav. Put a Tav on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that are done within it.
They're not weeping for Tammuz here.
No.
They're weeping for Jerusalem that they're allowing for the weeping of Tammuz.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. So, we shouldn't do what Israel did. We shouldn't be weeping for Tammuz by trying to tell the world that Yeshua followed the Torah, but then said, oh, he did it according to a Babylonian calendar. How's that any different from the church saying that Yeshua is the Messiah of the world and he was born on December 25th?
It's not any different.
So there's people in this movement that says, well, how can the church do that? I got to leave that system where they say he's the Messiah and he was born on December 25th, because he wasn't born on December 25th. And now are they got to go over here on the Torah side and say, oh, yeah, Yeshua followed the Torah and he did it according to a Babylonian calendar? How's that any different of a testimony than what the church is doing with December 25th?
Or Easter,
of what we're doing, stating that we follow the Torah and we're representatives of Yeshua that follow the Torah. We claim that we're being a light to the nations by showing that Yeshua followed the Torah, and then go and say that he followed a Babylonian calendar.
So essentially what I hear you saying is people will say, well, I got to get out of all of that paradigm of that Christian paradigm of Easter and Christmas and Valentine's Day and whatever else they're doing. I got to get out of that paradigm for sure.
Eating pork.
Oh yeah, eating pork and not keeping Sabbath, and yeah, we got to get out of that paradigm for sure.
And we got to follow the Torah. So we come over to the Messianic Jewish side and we say, well, we're keeping Torah, but we're not keeping Torah because we're doing the wrong calendar. We can't say we're keeping Torah if we're following a Babylonian calendar. It violates all the principles of Torah. And so the God of Israel told his people they were to be holy. That means separated, set apart. And so the principle of separation is in the garden. You have the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. in the garden, we're told, don't mix, follow Torah. So now all of a sudden we're following Torah and we're going to say, oh, it's okay to mix, to follow Babylonian calendar. It violates the instruction in the garden.
I suppose we could say, if I'm going to be weeping for Tammuz and keeping the Babylonian calendar, I might as well go ahead and keep Easter, Christmas, and eat pork and not keep the Sabbath as well.
I mean, how can you say that Christians are doing something wrong when you're following a Babylonian calendar?
Well, yeah, wow.
I mean, if you say it's okay to keep a Babylonian calendar because it's wrapped in Jewish, that if it's wrapped in Jewish, it's supposedly okay, and then you go to your family members and say, oh, you're doing something wrong because you're doing December 25th?
Doesn't make any sense.
How do you have the high ground?
Right, you don't have it.
You don't have the high ground.
No, we don't, no. This helps us to better understand then how the rabbinic Talmudic system of Judaism is in fact rejecting the calendar of the priestly Zadokim or the Beit Tzadok priesthood that they were charged with teaching and disseminating to Israel.
Thus, they're rejecting the authority of the high priesthood office as expressed through the Zadok priests.
Wow.
Okay. So then in order to show that they purposely are stating, no, we have the authority and not you, and rebelliously rejecting their authority, we have three examples for you here that on the Zadok priestly calendar, the first day of unleavened bread is always going to be on a Wednesday.
Fourth day of the week, always.
However, the rabbis made these rules, and you referred to them, or they refer to them as postponement rules.
They do. They have the postponement rule. You can look it up. Just look up the term postponement rules, and you'll find it. It's all in their literature. Yeah.
Okay, and so from their postponement rules, they have decreed that unleavened bread can never begin on a Wednesday. They're doing this to oppose the Zadok priestly calendar.
And their authority.
Our second example is Yom Teruah, commonly called the Feast of Trumpets, where on the Zadok priestly calendar it's always a Wednesday, but on the rabbinic Babylonian calendar, they've ruled it can never be on a Wednesday, as well as never being on Sunday or Friday.
And if it does, they're going to move it to another day.
Right. So why would it be these 3 days? Because on the Zadok priestly calendar, the 3 most important days of which significant festivals fall on is Sunday, Wednesday, Friday.
Always. It shows up.
So now they've ruled that the first of the year can never be on Sunday, Wednesday, Friday.
And they actually call it by an acronym, Lo Adurosh. That's actually their terminology, which means?
So the first is Aleph, and then the Dalet, and then the Vav. And so Aleph would be first day, Dalet 4, Wednesday, and then Vav Friday.
Right.
So now a final example is Yom Kippur, which on the Zadok priestly calendar is always on a Friday, but through the rabbinic postponement laws, they have ruled that Yom Kippur can never be on a Friday. So they've manipulated the calendar through the postponement rules so that things will fall as they desire and as they like. And in these postponement rules, it becomes clear that they were asserting their authority and rejecting the authority of the high priesthood office as expressed through the Zadok priests whenever the festivals are celebrated on that calendar.
That's why they changed things, because they didn't want any connection, any link to the authority of the Beit Tzadok of Qumran. They wanted nothing to do with that. So they made changes to make sure that things don't fall on those days.
Yes. So when Korah desired the high priesthood office or the function of it, there's a Torah portion regarding that issue, and as a lesson to the nation of Israel regarding it, we have the blossoming of Aaron's rod that budded, that Yah affirming that high priesthood office is always going to be with Aaron and his sons. Through our study, we see that now it's expressed through the line of Eleazar, through the family of Zadok. So any high priesthood that claims authority, instead of recognizing the Zadok priesthood, that is a form of the Korah rebellion, whether it's rabbinic Sanhedrin or whether it's the Hasmonean Maccabees who were high priests. The rejection of this priesthood is a form of a Korah rebellion. It's a very serious offense.
Which you can find and read about in the book of Bamidbar or Numbers, chapter 16. That's where that story is located. And Korah, by the way, he was a first cousin to Moses. So they knew each other very well, and you can see why all of that's happening. It's like, Korah is saying, we're going to do the priesthood. We're going to do it the way we, stop taking it on yourselves. We have a job to do also with this. And Moses says, and the Almighty says, When we come back from our break here, we're going to look at the priestly calendar in the Torah, in the written Torah, not the oral Torah, the written Torah. We'll actually see one very clear example. There are many, but we chose this particular one because it's so in your face. It's right there. So we'll look at that when we come back.